Hey everyone, there is some absolutely fantastic things happening in the real estate landscape, both nationally and locally, and I want to tell you all about them and how this could be a massive benefit to you. If we haven't met yet, my name's Gary Nims with Windermere Real Estate. Let's dive into the news. But first, you might be coming here because you're trying to understand some of the headlines that you may have been seeing since last Friday, March 15th, regarding the National Association of Realtors settlement. Some folks are saying that it's going to end the real estate industry. Others are saying it's going to reduce real estate fees on average by 20 to 30%. This week, I've spent significant amount of time looking at these issues and researching what's really going on and what's happening in our industry. And I'm not trying to sell newspapers with fantastical or tantalizing headlines, but I am going to give you an inside look at our industry and how this will affect you. It's going to be great. So without further ado, here's what happened. In 2019, a lawsuit was filed in Illinois by the Attorney General against the National Association of Realtors, what we'll call the NAR. Another suit was brought against the NAR in 2020 in Missouri. Now, the suits allege that basically MLSs were colluding with each other to keep listing prices high. And it's also alleged that consumers had limited choices when buying or selling a home. So additionally, it claimed that consumers were not able to easily access information about real estate commissions. So the DOJ, I mean, the United States, we're always seeking a free market, right? We want competition. We don't want price fixing. Our government demonstrated that all the way back in 1911 when they broke up Standard Oil. So, well, this has been going on for nearly 5 years, this lawsuit, and all in an effort to protect the consumer, give consumers more choices. So now you may have heard the NAR settled. Why did they settle? How could this not have been an admission of guilt? I mean, why agree to pay millions of dollars and not admit guilt? Well, I heard this straight from Kevin Sears. He's the president of the NAR, and I watched a video presentation of his, and he said that they had three options. This is the NAR. They could appeal, they could go bankrupt, or they could settle. Now, if they appealed, they would have been forced under this scenario to post up to a $5.4 billion bond, and they just didn't have those kind of resources. So number two, an appeal would have left most of the MLSs across the country vulnerable to copycat suits, where an attorney firm sees a successful legal recipe to bring cases against other MLSs, and then those other MLSs find themselves distracted from their day-to-day services and activities and hamstrung in legal fees. Okay, so that's why they didn't appeal. Bankruptcy was an option. They didn't want to go that route. Settlement was the logical conclusion. So there's two parts to this settlement. One's financial and one is rules. So the financial was to pay $418 million over a specified period of time. Don't know exactly what that period of time is. I've heard some suggestions, but not going to post that here. And then the rules are to create an environment of competitive compensation. So what they're going to do is they're going to prohibit the advertising. Now, this is just a suggestion, but here's what the suggestion is. We're going to prohibit the advertising on the MLS of an offer of compensation from the seller to the brokerage who brings the buyer for their property. They're not going to be able to advertise their 3% or 2.5% or 2% or whatever the seller says they're offering the buyer's brokerage to bring a buyer. The next one is you're going to need to have a written agreement while representing a buyer. Well, hey, as of January 1st, 2024, we're already there in Washington. So now I've heard it said on the financial end, I've heard it said just anecdotally that the compensation that some sellers may receive from this settlement, their 418 million, could be around 31 bucks. But that's purely speculation. I don't know that for sure. There's just a lot of ground to cover on this and a lot to unveil before we know anything for sure. And locally, will our Northwest Multiple Listing Service, will it follow suit with what's happening nationally? Because of all 50 states, our MLS has made the most changes of any brokerage in the nation that I'm aware of. They're not run by the NAR. So our MLS may make 0 changes. All right. Finally, we get to this. What's Gary's take on this? Hey, this is my YouTube report, my YouTube channel. Many of you are my clients. One of my most important virtues that I strive for personally and professionally is authenticity. So let me be real with you, as I always strive to do. Does price fixing occur in our industry? Do brokerages collaborate on keeping fees at a certain rate? I can't speak for the brokerages that first came under scrutiny with the lawsuits filed against them in Missouri or Illinois. I imagine there was significant evidence of collusion between brokerages but I'm privy to none of that evidence. So that's my way of saying it's not for me to decide. Those things are out of yours and my control. I can say the MLS called the Northwest Multiple Listing Service that serves the Pacific Northwest here. It serves 26 out of our 39 counties in Washington State. And it's one that I'm a member of. It's worked very hard to keep high ethical industry standards. Great example of this is the publishing of compensation offerings to buyer brokerages and making that viewable to the public back in October of 2020. This was an effort made to have transparency or even force transparency in the marketplace between real estate brokers and the clients we serve. So that, it brings up a conversation, right? Now, many MLSs across the country are affiliated with the National Association of Realtors. And there's a business connection between the NAR and many of these MLSs. The Northwest MLS has no such affiliation with the NAR. However, many brokers here have memberships, myself included, because they do some really good work that affects the public in our industry. So if the Department of Justice accepts this settlement and the solution presented by the NAR, it drops all lawsuits for those organizations that opt in. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's all you really need to know at the moment. If the Northwest Multiple adopts this settlement, well, that could act as insurance that they would not leave themselves open to copycat lawsuits. While there's been so much industry chatter within our offices and throughout the region, the Northwest Multiple hasn't indicated one way or the other if they're going to opt in and adopt these practices. But if they do, here's a few things that you need to know. This won't take effect for months, if not longer. It's going to be business as usual for us. We'll keep offering the same great service with professional and expert real estate counsel to our clients. Number 2, if it does take effect, at that time, you won't see the amount of compensation a seller offers the buyer brokerage anymore. That will be taken away. You won't see that on your Zillow or your Redfin app or Homes.com app, what you may have. Compensation will be absolutely allowed to be offered by the seller. That's very key. You're just not going to see it advertised anymore, unfortunately. Number 3, and as of January 1st this year, actually the NAR is catching up with us here in the Pacific Northwest. You'll still be required by the state of Washington under Chapter 18.86 of the Revised Code of Washington. You'll still be required to have an agreement with your real estate broker. And this agreement must address what compensation you agree to pay your broker, no matter what the seller offers. Now, back to my take. I'm an absolute advocate in these changes. Outside of the removal of the seller's compensation offering from the public eye, I always think transparency is the best option. But there will be ways for us to present this information to our clients. Now, will this help our industry? This is going to be a huge help for our industry. Forcing every buyer and real estate broker to come to an agreement ahead of time, set some ground rules, is going to be absolutely the best thing for our industry in many ways. Number 1, this is going to reduce the number of part-time real estate brokers out there. And I don't mean the ones getting into the industry that you're just moving from one industry to another. I mean, that was me once when I was moving from owning my construction company to real estate. We welcome fresh life into this industry where new brokers will learn a trade, adopt ethical standards and an attitude of service. They'll learn to crunch numbers, offer expert advice in timing and negotiation. And is this the right house? And how do we vet this home? Learn neighborhoods, good marketing skills so their clients benefit. If you're thinking about a career in real estate, let's talk. I'll offer you some great advice about where to get started so that we can elevate our industry. Come on. However, if you've been part-time and this is your third or fourth side gig, you might be like the construction industry where I came from. There's a portion of folks working off the tailgate of their pickup and running a fly-by-night business. And don't get me wrong, when I started, I was working off the tailgate of my pickup, but I got licensed. I had insurance. I was bonded. I was a student of the industry. I'd drive every year down to Portland to the Journal of Light Construction convention to learn better business and building practices. But if you're not a student of the business, you're just there to make a quick buck and then you mess up somebody's home and charge them money for it, never to be found again. No, we don't want folks like that in our industry. Those people, they should charge, I mean, they should charge less. In fact, perhaps they should pay you, because when you're negotiating, this is back to real estate brokers, when you're negotiating $1 million transactions like the home that we have, the types of homes that we have in the Pacific Northwest, you have to be professional, or you're not only going to affect a client's pocketbook, you can expose them to lawsuits. We need to weed out unprofessionals in our industry. And I think these agreements are an avenue to do that. Okay, that's number one. I'll condense the next one. Two, this is going to help the professional brokers spend a little bit more time explaining why you want to hire us in the first place. I know you may have heard brokers say, my listing sold for 100,000, 300, 500,000 above the list price. Yes, you want a pro when the game is on the line, but we don't always do a good job of explaining why you need representation. Let me give you 5 quick reasons, okay? Number 1, real estate is complex. There's a lot of moving parts in negotiation, qualifying a property, working with sellers and other brokers, handling their personalities, walking through the escrow process, lots of legal ramifications. Transactions are complex. Okay, number 2, it's risky. There is a lot at stake, specifically money and legality, like I just mentioned. Number 3, it's infrequent. Most people do this on average once every 7 years. What are you good at that you do once every 7 years? Okay. Number 4, it's unpredictable. There's so many things that can happen because there's so many people and types of properties and issues that come along with them all. 5, it's emotional. Who's going to be outside the emotion when this comes? When the emotion hits? Do you know that most of your emotion is in your limbic system? Brain experts will tell you that your frontal lobe or your thinking brain is where your best decisions are formed. Bad decisions come from the emotion center. When something goes wrong and you don't know what to do, your emotion center comes online, and what I might call your 2-year-old brain, we all have one, gets real loud. A good broker is able to calm that puppy down, first with care, listening, and solutions for you to consider when you are able to simmer down. Okay. Now, you might have heard things like I've heard, hey, this is going to reduce real estate fees by as much as 20% to 30%. It's going to reduce home prices, make them more affordable. Homes aren't going to appraise less because of this scenario. Here's why. The seller and the buyer, they can't save the same dollar. Okay. Every dollar that the seller saves, they plan to keep. This won't affect the market value of homes. Think of it a different way. Every dollar the buyer saves is a dollar that the seller would agree to sell their property below the market price. Okay. Are they going to do that? No. In this scenario, the market's not going to give up the dollar. It's going to be the seller that says, well, I'm just going to keep more of the money. Great. Buyer, you're going to pay me, number 1, and you're going to pay me market value, and you're not going to get any representation. Now you might say, Gary, I don't want any bullet points. I'm done with this logic. Give me some rubber that meets the road. Okay, here, I'll give you rubber that meets the road. So if the buyer doesn't have representation, then the buyer's likely to say, well, how am I going to do this? Okay, I don't know how to fill out the contracts. I guess I could figure that out. What if I'm buying a condo and I don't know how to look over the reserve study? I don't even know what that is, or the resale certificate. And I don't understand that there's really an assessment, but the listing broker said there wasn't. Or what about street improvements that the builder down the street paid for, but there's a sewer capacity charge for hookup that you don't know about and it wasn't addressed in the contract, and it has to be paid for at a certain point after the buyer owns the property and the seller's long gone, of course. Or there's a lien on the house and they don't get paid off at closing. The seller leaves all their garbage or belongings that they don't want anymore on the property, and you didn't know you had the right to walk the property 5 days prior to closing when you could have done something about it. Now your only option is small claims court. That's going to be fun. Or how about financing? Who's going to fight the appraisal when it comes in low, especially during the early spring when home prices tend to jump up and there's not any solds to really support the price? You're supposed to renegotiate with the seller, and neither one of you are understanding or even have the ability to organize the information to support each other's claim. The seller just argues, the house is worth this. The buyer argues, the appraisal says it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. It turns into a playground argument with no one having the ability to speak sense in the situation. When all the seller wants at the end of the day is to sell their home at the best possible price and terms so that they can move on. All the buyer wants is to buy this home at the best possible price and terms so they can move in. I have so many stories that would support the need for a real estate broker walking buyers through this process. It's not a binary process. Check this box, use this credit card, send this product to our address. I'll return it if it doesn't fit with no shipping charges. Real estate's not like that. We were just talking about the emotional component to the process, the consulting aspect. How do you know you're making the right decision? Who's on the outside of the decision looking on without the typical emotion that accompanies this process, helping you qualify your decision based solely on the criteria that you and your real estate broker professionally put together? Who has a process that helps ensure that you don't buy a lemon? Who's helping ensure that you don't overpay? Who helps give you the best chance to win the day when 8 other buyers are making an offer on the house that's finally come along and it fits you just to a T? Who has a process that helps ensure that the home that you're after doesn't just drift through the market without even knowing about it until it's too late? Don't get me wrong. None of these processes are perfect. No real estate broker is perfect. I'm not perfect. And not every broker is worth their salt, like in any industry. Working with a great real estate broker is a little like hiring a captain on your sailboat and you're not a sailor. He looks over the weather report so you have an idea of what to expect before you set adrift. And then when you get some weather, he has the experience to adjust based on the swell, the winds, which sails to trim, which tack to take to get to your destination still, despite all the ships. And while your life may not depend on a real estate transaction like it might on a captain when you're out in the ocean, this certainly is the largest financial decision that most people will ever make, with certainly the largest amount of money at stake. So who's going to help you when you're feeling discouraged because the right home hasn't come on the market? Who's going to show you the numbers and say, you know what, it's going to be all right? Because we typically see this type of house that you're looking for on average 26 times a year. Another one's right around the corner. Maybe we don't have to shoot for the moon on this one. Or the opposite. It's October and typically we won't see any consistent inventory for this type of home until March. And if your circumstances are such that it would best serve you to be in the home by Christmas, let's pull out all the stops and make sure you get this one. If you happen to be one of my clients, the answer to all of these questions is absolutely straightforward. I'll do all of these things. I'm on your side. Hey, this video is already way too long. Let me close by saying this. How the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice come together to reformat a portion of our industry, it's out of yours and my control. But there's certainly a lot of good that can come out of this. As long as I can serve you and support my family at the same time, I'm going to be here to provide all these services to you. I'll professionally handle the marketing and sale for highest and best of your existing home. I'll hand you your keys to your new place. I'll be a resource for you in the in-between time with property reviews as you empire build, data to fight your property taxes if they come in too hot, real estate information that makes you look like a pro at your company Christmas party. That's extremely important. Recommendations when you consider home improvement projects, which will improve your value, and which, just because it's going to help you love where you live all the more. There's a lot of ground to cover, and you can bet that I'll be here to give you updates. Thanks for watching. I absolutely believe the best is yet to come.